Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Surai Satchid Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. Last time we discussed Swamiji's activity mainly in New York in the month of December of 1895. At the close of 1895, there was Christmas vacation. So for 10 days, Swamiji took leave to brace him up for the work in the beginning of 96. And it was a good bracing up because he stayed again with the legates, which is called the Ridgely Manor, and something like 80 kilometers to the north of New York town. It was a vast area where they had several buildings, and Swamiji enjoyed this Xmas vacation very much because they were the only hosts in America who would give Swamiji complete freedom, and they used to understand his needs. For example, sometimes he would like to talk, so they would come to listen. Sometimes he would sing in Bengali or Hindi or in Sanskrit. He would sing, and they let him sing. Sometimes he would like to be alone, and in meditation, etc., they used to leave him alone. Certain other times he would also go out for excursions in the snow-clad areas on the mountains, with certain times with horses and sleigh, and sometimes brisk walking in the countryside. And it was, as usual, the winter setting. That means everywhere there is snow, trees without leaves, and smoke coming out of each building from their chimneys. So that is the summer setting, but he enjoyed these 10 days from 23rd of December to 2nd of January. And he was back to New York on the 3rd. And he wrote at this time to Swami Ramananda, "Don't fear, the Divine Mother is looking after me. And this year, so much work will be turned out that we will become struck dumb to hear of it." Indeed, this 1896 was a very work of intense work in different continents. He would go in 1896, and we shall see what is in store for us. What was he doing? There in the distance, there is the Catskill Mountains, and in that region he found a big plot of land, 101 acres area. Price is only $200. So he wanted to buy it for a summer retreat with the help of Mrs. Bull. Just imagine $200, 101 acres of land. And the most important thing in this time at Ridgely Manor was that it was one evening, he was highly inspired and talked before his hosts for 2.5 hours. They were so much inspired that they wrote it in several letters. They have never seen Swamiji in such high mood of inspiration and talking in such a language. And it is unimaginable, they said, that a mortal being could utter such words. So he was on his height of spiritual inspiration. So that is, you see, what has made Ridgely Manor memorable. And fortunately, this manor is a part of our property in USA. Swami Swahananda bought it. Another thing, he took a big your decision. It was in his mind already from England to America. He decided to be like a sannyasi. That means for classes charging anything, he would not do it. So, you see, and he would gradually, may say, disengage himself from all monetary affairs. Monetary affairs, whatever, the society should do it, the Vedanta society, but he himself was aloof and he would not charge anything. So that means he had to live an extremely frugal life now. And he was happy with it because he remembered his days of frugality in India, days of tapasya. So like that, he was carrying on. And the society was poor, but still he continued like that. So that idea was that many poor people may join in his class, so no charges. Only one thing, he decided that his lectures should be published, since there was already, we have discussed, this stenographer who had joined in mid-December. So this stenographer who used to live just opposite his residence, and he used to by his side like a shadow. That means he used to take down, then type it, then Miss Waldo, we have mentioned, would do a little correction, then again typing, and then going back to Swamiji for his approval, and then going to the press, and then of course the question of proofreading, etc. So all these things were going on, so it was brisk activity. Idea was that when he would leave New York, there will be some matter for the devotees to discuss, etc., etc., something. Otherwise, till then, everything was fluid. He was talking, people was listening. Half of it, more than half of it, is forgotten even by the most sincere. So it was happening like that. So to make it more permanent, he took up these things, but this immediately could not happen. It required a little time for all these arrangements. So the first lecture was not published. And the first lecture was, the title was, it was a Sunday in Hardman Hall. It was given, and Swamiji said that normally 900 people will come, 300 would go away because of lack of space, 300 people will sit down, and 300 people will listen to him in a standing position. So that was the situation. Now, what was the title of the first talk? Title of the first talk was Claims of Religion, Its Truth and Utility. That was the talk given. Why he chose this subject? I think he chose this subject because he remembered his struggles in the 80s of that century, at least the first 5 years, great struggle. Then also the struggle continued in the 6th year when Sri Ramakrishna was sick. But then this struggle, you see, made him reach the pinnacle of spiritual experience, I mean, Nirvikalpa Samadhi. And in those times, you see, as I have told you earlier, that he was highly influenced by Mill's 3 essays on religion. Mill says that much which grows by the name of religion, if you begin to scrutinize it, if you begin to scan it and apply your reason, they fall to the ground. So he said that the truths of religion, before being accepted, should be tested as we test facts in science. This dictum became a part of Swamiji's mind, so he would never accept anything without proof. So this proof, because he was moving, see, as you know, in the impersonal path, in the language of Sri Ramakrishna, Akhandir Ghar. So it was the most difficult path, meant for the most heroic, because reading your Advaita Vedanta is one thing, understanding it is another step, but realizing it in the sense that you make it a part of your life through direct experience, that is quite another thing. And Swamiji fortunately did it. And he remembered what questions, what doubts were in his mind regarding these religious questions. So he took up this subject, and he had confidence that his listeners could understand these subtle points, because the same substance, that means the entity of which Advaita Vedanta talks about, is in every soul. Slokadhyena pravakshami yaduktam grantha kotivi brahma satyam jagan mithya jiva brahmaiva napara. So this, he was convinced about it. And another question was that the whole of West, especially the intelligent elite, their minds were tremendously perturbed due to the Darwinian theory, which shattered many pet ideas received from religion. So that was another question. And when you begin to doubt something about religion, what happens? You begin to doubt everything about religion. That is human nature. It is like that. So Swamiji took up this subject. What is the utility? Now he says that religion has made man what he is, and this religion will make man, this human animal, a god. So if you take off religion, what remains in the society? A forest of brutes, he said. So what today's China is attempting to take out from the mind of the people the idea of a religion. So now that is his way of dealing with it. Then he says, essentially, religion belongs to the superconscious and not to the sense plane. This is, you see, where he is touching. That means he's touching what in India is called Vijnana, Jnana and Vijnana. So he belongs to the super sensuous and not to the sense plane. It is beyond all reasoning and not on the plane of intellect. It is a vision, an inspiration, a plunge into the unknown and unknowable, making the unknowable more than known, for it can never be known. Why he is saying this? Making the unknowable more than unknowable, more than known, because it can never be known. It can never be known because it cannot be objectified. Where the subject and object, they say the distinction goes away, then you cannot objectify it. And the ordinary mind does not exist when you are experiencing these things. So it can never be known, but yet It is more than known because you gain a certitude about its existence due to this experience. This search has been in the human mind, as I believe, from the very beginning of humanity. There cannot have been human reasoning and intellect in any period of world's history without this struggle, this search beyond. Man could not find what is there beyond this sense objects, from where this world has come, from where all these phenomena we are seeing arising. Man has always this question, and ordinarily he could not find, because it is not easy to find. It is my belief that religious thought is in man's very constitution, so much so that it is impossible for him to give up religion until he can give up his mind and body, until he can stop thought and life. That means religion in the sense in which Swamiji is taking it. That means this question, what is beyond that? Man cannot help asking this question. As long as man thinks, this struggle must go on, and so long man must have some form of religion. The great question of all questions at the present time is this: why shall we not be content with the known? Why shall we not rest satisfied with eating, drinking, and doing a little good to the society? So that is the question, I say, which he presupposes were in the mind of the audience. Swamiji says, fortunately, we must inquire into the beyond, because this is a human, mind is like that. This present, this expressed, is only one part of that unexpressed. The sense universe is, as it were, only one portion, one bit of that infinite spiritual universe projected into the plane of sense manifestations. How can this bit of projection be explained, be understood without knowing that which is beyond? This God, this eternally unknowable or absolute or infinite, or without any name, you may call him by what name you like, is the rationale, is the only explanation, the raison d'etre of that which is known and knowable, this present life. The facts religion discovered and spoke of constituted the basis of the phenomenal world. That such facts could not be verified by sense experience or reason could not render them meaningless. They are the very essence of meaning. Yet, on the other hand, Swamiji strongly condemned accepting something with blind faith. Believing anything with blind faith is degenerating for the human mind. You should never do it. That means while he was saying about the limits of reasoning, that reasoning cannot go beyond certain limit, he was not against reasoning. If one man was inspired, it is possible for each and every one of us to be inspired, and that is religion. Come face to face with religious facts and come into direct contact with the science of religion. Religion does not consist in believing any number of doctrines of dogmas, in going to churches and temples, in reading certain books. That means he's talking about this vijnana. Normally, people are content with this externals of religion, and they do not understand that the goal of religion is not this. Have you seen God? Have you seen the soul? If not, are you struggling for it? Religion is here and now in this present life. So that is how he is putting religion. So it is not the ordinary religion. It is not the question of doctrines. You see, papally peaceful in the domain of theology, for example. They take doctors in theology and they think that they know everything about religion. Swamiji is shattering those ideas that it is useless, because with this you cannot solve the problems of your life. You cannot, find the questions which are fundamental to our existence. So the same divine essence from which ideas emanated is ever present in man, therefore he can always understand them. This is another idea of Swamiji, that in ordinary Vedanta, they speak much about adhikari. Have you have this competence? Adhikari means having the competence. So, adhikari question. Swamiji is to say that since jiva brahmaiva napara, so he will understand the message. Only what is necessary, his attention must be drawn to it, and he must struggle. Without struggle, it does not come. So then he says also that we find, because the question of utility is coming, we find that man enjoys his intellect much more than an animal enjoys his senses. And we see that man enjoys his spiritual nature even more than his rational nature. So the highest wisdom is utility. You see, the utility must be the spiritual knowledge. So if you say that enjoyment is the rationale behind everything, that means a kind of hedonism. So even from that angle, you should take up the spiritual struggle, because the knowledge which comes along with that, the bliss, is enormous. You cannot compare it with anything else in this world. With this knowledge will come bliss. All these things of the world are but the shadows, the manifestations in the third or fourth degree of the real knowledge and bliss. You see, the next talk will be, which is very dear to Swamiji, and which was also dear to his Guru Sri Ramakrishna, and the question of religious harmony. They say, or in his words, in the words of Swamiji, the universal religion. Now, how can you have a universal religion? So because normally religions are seen to be composed of doctrines, of mythology, and rituals. You cannot have one set of doctrines for the whole world. You cannot have one universal mythology for all the nations. You cannot have one universal ritual for all mankind. So how is it possible to have the ideal of universal religion established? Swamiji says that what we can do, we can lessen the friction, first by recognizing the necessity of variation. And then truth can be expressed in 100,000 ways, and each of the ways is true as far as it goes. Now, this is very much in one of the religions of India, the Jainism, Anekantavad. Your Siddhanta cannot be unique because your standpoints are different. So they talk about Anekantavad. That means different standpoints, many views of the truth. And another word they use, Shadbad. That means maybe viewpoint is true. That is the meaning of Shadbad. So this Anekantavad and Shadbad, Swamiji is talking about this thing, you see, in another language. Through high philosophy or low, through exalted mythology or most the gross mythology, through refined ritualism or this fetishism of Africa, for example. Each sect, each man, each nation, each religion, consciously or unconsciously, is moving towards the goal. But he admitted that there are stages on this. You see, he said that you can have the vision of truth from different standpoints. Now, there are stages on the way from where the view of the goal approximates the goal, and that gives a value to that standpoint, to that, etc. For example, the Advaita Vedanta. Advaita Vedanta's idea of the verity, of the ultimate verity, it is approximates the verity itself. That means the uniqueness of existence, to put it shortly, the uniqueness of existence. But he would remind that from whatever standpoint you are viewing the goal remains the same. If you acknowledge it, then there lies the universality of religion. In that struggle, in the same direction. He again said that variety of religious views created by different capacities and characters, each mind shaping its own idea of God, like vessels shaping the water they contain. This is another thing. Minds are different, so each mind is having its own idea of God. But again, how to then achieve this? What is the pragmatic way to lessen this friction among the warring religions? Swamiji said that Parliament of Religions, two formula he gave: do not destroy, and another formula: help if you can, and if you cannot help, say, fold your hands and stand by and look at things going on. But yet, a positive your basis for harmony of religion is necessary. That's why he talked often about need of a religion which is equally philosophic, equally emotional, equally mystic, and equally conducive to action. This was Swamiji's panacea for the modern world. That means this type of religion. That means each person should do that. That's why you remember he gave the idea about the insignia of the Ramakrishna order, the 4 yogas. I'm talking about the insignia, which is outer, this periphery is the serpent. There is a power in us which is like serpent. That means it remains dormant as if, and at a point it gets up, you say, Kundalini as they call. That is it, and he talked about it again in Belur Math Rules. He said that anyone who shows a lack of interest or enthusiasm in any one of the yogas, his life has not been grounded while in the crucible of Ramakrishna. In this language, and in his hymn, one of the hymns composed for Sri Ramakrishna, he says, Advaya Tattva Samahita Chittam Projjala Bhakti Patavrita Vrityam karma kalevara madbhuta cheshtam yami gurum sharanang bhavavaidyam. That means he found, you see, all the yogas manifested in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. The last two talks in January were the cosmos macrocosm and cosmos microcosm, because the questions arise, and in Western theology they do not give much answer to it, regarding question of evolution, say, which was dominating the mind of many people in the second half of 19th century, because of Darwinian theory being well established by that time. Now, he says, nothing can be created out of nothing. Everything exists through eternity and will exist through eternity. Only the movement is in succeeding waves and hollows, going back to fine forms and coming out in gross manifestations. This is known to all students of Vedanta. This, because Vedanta accepts the cosmology of the Sankhya, which goes in this line. This involution and evolution is going on throughout the whole of nature. The whole of series of evolution, beginning with the lowest manifestation of life and reaching up to the highest, the most perfect man, must have been the involution of something else. The question is, involution of what? What was involved? He gives the answer, God was involved. The evolution is to tell you your God is intelligent, but we find that intelligence develops much later on in the course of evolution. This objection of the evolutionists does not hold water, as we shall see by applying our theory. The tree comes out of the seed, goes back to the seed. The beginning and the end are the same. The earth comes out of its cause and returns to its cause. E converso. If we find the end, we can find the beginning. In the end, we find the perfect man. So in the beginning, it must have been the same. Therefore, the protoplasm was the involution of the highest intelligence. That perfect man, who is at one end of the chain of evolution, was involved in the cell of the protoplasm, which is at the other end of the same chain. Applying the same reason to the whole of the universe, we see that intelligence must be the Lord of creation, because what is the most evolved notion that man has of this universe? It is intelligence. The beginning was therefore intelligence. The sum total of the intelligence displayed in the universe must therefore be the involved universal intelligence unfolding itself. This universal intelligence is what we call God. We can see this is according to Vedanta. If you read Vedanta Sara explains God in this way. We now see that the all various forms of cosmic energy, such as matter, thought, force, intelligence, and so forth, are simply the manifestation of that cosmic intelligence. Everything that you see, feel, or hear, the whole universe is his creation, or to be a little more accurate, is the Lord himself. He is that comes down and becomes the lowest atom, and slowly unfolding his nature rejoins himself. This is the mystery of the universe. This is the only solution of the cosmos that satisfies the human intellect. In other words, we are born of him, we live in him, and to him we return. This is the gist of his explanations. And then he would go like Sri Ramakrishna, his teaching of Ramakrishna, which first repelled him and which afterwards he had to accept. So he's saying like this: he's the man who is talking, he's the audience who is listening. He is the platform on which he is standing, and it is he, the light with which I am seeing your face. It is, everything is the Lord. So it reminds the devotees of Ramakrishna of what Sri Ramakrishna used to say. He himself has become all these things. So that is it, you say. And then he would go on to discuss the question of who is this I. We have discussed the big things, macrocosm and microcosm, but still the ego, the sense of I, that means I am, the ego. The microcosm, man is led to analyze the internal. This question of the internal man comes into a higher state of civilization, with a deeper insight into nature, with a higher state of growth. And this question had become particularly active in the latter part of the 19th century, when the concept of man as a special creation of God has received a damaging blow from the Darwinian theory. The concept of man as a higher animal, long held by rationalists and now confirmed by science, opened wide the door of the jungle. If the man is an animal, should he not rightly act like one rather than suppress his natural bent? This question came. He is going to this question. I am looking at you. How many things are necessary for this vision? First, the eyes. Secondly, the nerve center in the brain. Third, the mind must be there. The mind, too, is only the carrier. It has to carry the sensation still forward and present it to the intellect. Still, this is not the sufficient. The intellect must carry it forward and present the whole thing before the ruler in the body, the human soul, the king on the throne. The instruments are in the external body, the gross body of man, but the mind and intellect are not. They are in what is called in Hindu philosophy the finer body, Sukshma Sharira, and what in Christian theology you read of as the spiritual body of man. Finer, very much finer than the body, and yet not the soul. The soul is beyond them all. So this is the question of the inner man. So let us stop here. And if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Victor. And thank you, Swamiji, for the talk. I have two questions. One is, you mentioned Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Can you explain a bit more the characteristics or the state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi?
Nirvikalpa Samadhi, you say Nirvikalpa, that means there is no vikalpa, there is no, you say, no duality there. You see, everything, and not even your ego exists. Your ego will be totally submerged. The ego does not exist. Ego in the sense of I am. The sense of I am is lost, and you are not asleep. You are fully awake, and you are in, you see, the mind is in the highest state of concentration and purity. These are the, you see, the words you can say, and what you understand then, it cannot be expressed in human language because it does not resemble anything in the universe. To describe it is always the support of something known and visible. See, since this is what you are understanding at that level, does not resemble anything in this universe, because this universe is a shadow of that thing. So you see, this has to be experienced by each one.
Thank you very much, Swamiji. And the other question is of the concept of universal intelligence, which you mentioned, that Swamiji talked about. And is this the same as Mahat, which you have explained in other talks?
Yes, yes, it is the same thing as Mahat. intelligence, cosmic intelligence.
Thank you,
It is the
Swamiji.
same thing as the Mahat of Sankhya.
Thank you very much, Swamiji.
Yes.
So I have maybe one question for you, Swamiji.
Yes.
So Swami Vivekananda, he has taught the universal religion.
Yes.
So if we consider that as a unifying part of all religions, on the other hand, we have these religions which are based on fanaticism.
Yes.
So how is it possible, or did Swamiji find a remedy for bringing them closer to universal religion? Because as it looks that fanaticism is basically a poison for the world.
Yes, truly, because you see, fanaticism is because the religious, when they become fanatic, they rely on emotions, and emotion bereft of intellect is a dangerous thing. If you take away your intellect and you give your emotion the full play, in fact, in most human beings, the suffering is due to this. That means they have too much of emotion and imagination, and they are, you see, they do not apply their intellect, their reasoning, which can give a break to it. You see, it is a dangerous thing. So it is easy for human mind to become fanatic, because the religions, you see, normally they are preached with the idea of that salvation. Yes, the idea of salvation. You follow this set of doctrines, then you will have salvation. Otherwise not. This kind of thinking puts the people in a, they begin to think that we are right, and those who are not thinking like us, they're wrong. Next step is they are not wrong, they are sinful. Then the next step is, if it is sinful, then God wants to punish them, and we should help God. That means we should punish them. And so that is the rationale behind fanaticism. We must go and burn their houses. We must, if possible, cut them to pieces, etc., etc. So that is your fanaticism. So Swamiji says that first of all, you must recognize that whatever maybe the religion, maybe most crude form of religion, there also the human mind is struggling to go beyond. And in and through this, all these religions, human mind is trying to go upward. So it is the same principle from which they have come, because at the origin of religion you find certain people who are inspired and who gave certain messages. This inspiration came from where? From the source, you see, of the universe, from God himself. So that's why in the Yoga Sutra, one of the sutras says that Sapurbishamapi Guru Kalena Avachchadat. He is the guru of even the ancient gurus, because he is the only guru who has not been truncated by time. So that is the first point, that God is everywhere, and all the paths are paths to God. So that is number one. Number two, he says that you must also have this your idea of do not destroy, but help. If you cannot help, just stand aside. That is number two. And thirdly, he gives another idea that the modern man should take up this, in his language, union of yoga. That means all the yogas he must practice. He is to say that the ancient ideal was the development of one faculty at the cost of others. The modern ideal is the harmonious development of all the faculties. That means you should take up all the yogas as far as it is possible for you. So that will be a remedy for this fanaticism.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Yeah.
So no more questions have come in. So
Yeah.
I guess if you agree, we could go to your meditation with a subject. We have some time for that.
Yes. So
we will keep it at 6 minutes for each meditation.
So let us think of the vast space of Ridgely Manor where Swamiji based himself, and there he must have planned these ideas of his series of lectures in January in New York. So let us have this thing as the subject of meditation. You may think of any, if you do not have the image of Ridgely Manor in front of you, you can think of any other vast space in which, and Swamiji looking at the nature and contemplating at God. So you remember in the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna says many things. For example, I am Himalaya among the mountains. I am these among these, etc. So one of the commentators says that why he is saying this? If the whole universe is God, why you say that Himalayas, they say, I am a God is the Himalaya among the mountains? One of the commentators gives the answer to this. Indyadartas chitte bahidhavati satyapi ishadrishti vidhanaya dashame vibhutirabravit. Since through the doors of the sense organs, our mind is rushing outwards always. So to give the vision of God, this Vibhuti Yoga is being described in the 10th chapter. That means at least when you look at the big tree like Ashwatha, etc., you remember God. When it's a huge mountain you are coming across, it is God, etc. At least you have some idea. Though the highest idea is God is everything. So let us meditate upon this. We have discussed that Swamiji decided to become as much as possible in the Western setting like a sannyasin from 1896 onwards. So he was not, you see, so think of your Swamiji's life as a sannyasin, you see, which he is describing very shortly in one of the poems to a friend. That means the poem is you're entitled to a friend. You see. There he is describing shortly his life of tapasya, and that means he has done it on the banks of the Ganges, in the caves. You see, he has moved from door to door just for a morsel of food. So all these things, you see, he's describing. Once it happened, you see, in Almora, for example. He was lecturing. Suddenly at the end of the lecture, he showed a sign to a Muslim man who was in the audience. He came there and Swamiji gave him a 10 rupee note. And everyone was asking why he did it to this particular man. He said that many years ago, he lay unconscious on the road due to hunger. For several days, he had not eaten anything. This man took some vegetable which is called kakadi in India, which is almost like cucumber. So a little of this is a bits of this kakadi he was putting in his mouth and made him alive, you see. So he remembered it, you see. So such things, much of these things are not known. Something we have come to know. This you should think about the life of tapasya, this frugality, you see, which was also exhibited by the Holy Mother in the first few years after Sri Ramakrishna's passing away. We have described Swamiji's different your things. Now, one thing happened in this house during this period, perhaps. Swamiji came down, you say, from his room below where Miss Waldo was working. Miss Waldo used to prepare food for Swamiji. He used to correct the scripts typed by the stenographer. So he found that Miss Waldo was weeping. So anxiously Swamiji came near her and asked, what has happened? You see, why are you weeping? Miss Waldo replied that it seems that I am not able to please you. See, if anyone in the house, anyone else in the house does something wrong, you come and scold me. That was her reply. Swamiji immediately said that, you see, I do not know these people sufficiently. How can I scold them? And whom shall I scold if I cannot scold my own? So this statement of Swamiji's that he scolds only those people whom he considers his own, this took away the burden from her mind. So let us meditate on this